Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte from New Zealand Shores. I'm one of the licensed advisors here in the team, and today we are joined by Shelly, who is a member of the New Zealand Physicians Associates Society in New Zealand. She's busy working towards making PAs a more recognised profession in New Zealand, even though we actually do have quite big demand across a number of clinics at the moment. So we are today going to go through, I'll give you a bit of a rundown about what life in New Zealand might look like, the visas you're eligible for, and then Shelly will also discuss what's happening in her world with the society and what job opportunities look like as well for PAs. So I'll just share my screen if everyone can be with me a second. So as I've just mentioned, our whole webinar today is focused around moving to New Zealand as a physician's assistant or a physician's associate, as they are called down under here in New Zealand. So a little bit about New Zealand Shores. We are an immigration consultancy which does actually do visas for New Zealand and Australia, but today we're largely focused around the migration process to New Zealand. If you are interested in Australia, please do reach out because we can give you some guidance in that space as well. So we're a very diverse team. We're a team of 12 licensed advisors, and only 3 out of those 12 were actually born in New Zealand. So the majority of our team are actually migrants themselves, which means we've got experience on both sides of the spectrum. We've got people who have been through this migration process themselves, so we'll be able to hold your hand through that process and truly understand what you are going through with that process. We've been around since 2009, and a number of our team have also worked for Immigration New Zealand. So we get a lot of insider knowledge about how immigration process applications and the things that we all have to be mindful of when we're submitting. So we find that a really great addition to our team and a great knowledge base that we can work with. So we're well prepared to take care of you and your family throughout that immigration process. So our agenda today will largely be around life in New Zealand visas and job search and opportunities. And then we can also have a little question and answer at the end if we do have anyone join us. So some basic facts about New Zealand. We are much smaller than any of you who will be joining us today. We are a population of only 5.2 million people. If you look at that little infographic on the left there, the white parts are actually where people live. So if you look at the rest of New Zealand, there's actually almost no one living here if you look at it from that frame. So everyone is largely focused around the coasts, and then you'll also see that the North Island is far more populated than the South. We do like people to keep an open mind though when they're choosing to migrate. It may look like potentially there's more job opportunities in the north, but we do get clients moving right throughout New Zealand in all occupations. So it's good to keep an open mind about where you want to live. A fun fact about New Zealand, some people will think of grass paddocks with sheep in them, and that is highly accurate of what New Zealand looks like. So we have 5.1 sheep to every person, and you'll never be further than 128 kilometres from the ocean. So where I live in Hamilton, we are actually landlocked, for lack of a better term. But on one coast, I've got black sands and surf beaches 45 minutes away. And then on the other coast, I've got white sand beaches just over an hour away. So even though I am landlocked, the beach is never far, which is awesome. So if you're looking for that coastal lifestyle, New Zealand's definitely for you. We're also the first country in the world to see the sunrise. So when the new millennium ticked over in the year 2000, we had a massive influx of people for tourism purposes coming down to New Zealand to be the first people in the world to see that new millennium roll in. And the same things happens every new year. We get a big influx of visitors over that period. One, because it's our summer time, and two, you will be some of the first people in the world to see that new year. And so that's just a fun little fact. If you're wanting to start your day first in the world, well, this is the place to be. We are also the least corrupt nation in the world, which is something we're really proud of. Our government's very transparent. You can't bribe your way around New Zealand, fortunately or unfortunately, some people think, but it is a really great draw card that we think is important to share. And our unemployment at the moment is sitting around 4.6 to 5%. So it has fluctuated a little bit in the last few months, but there are plenty of employment opportunities. And I like to raise this fact just because if you are migrating as a family, if you are a PA, your partner might not be. And it just means that there's really great employment opportunities down here in New Zealand. With a small population and a small unemployment rate, it does mean that there are a lot of people that just can't find the staff that they need. So they do need to hire migrants or people freshly into the country to fill those labour roles. We're also free of animals that want to kill you. So if you're tossing up between us and Australia, New Zealand does not have anything that will bite you, poison you, maul you in the woods. We have no snakes, spiders, or big, large predators. So if you love the great outdoors, you'll be able to get out and walk around without having to worry about where you're putting your feet or what might be in the trees above you. The New Zealand culture is also very diverse. So our makeup is largely people of European descent. So when New Zealand was colonised back in the 1800s, we did have a massive influx from Britain, so the UK, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. So that is where a big portion of our population has come from. But then we also have 50% Maori, which is our native indigenous population, 12% Asian, and 7.5% of Pacific Islanders. But you will find literally every culture possible that you can think of down here in New Zealand as well. And most workplaces are indicative of that as well. You'll, just like ours here at New Zealand Shores, you'll often find that you're surrounded by people from different nationalities just because we are historically a place that a lot of people have migrated to, and we still remain a really popular migration destination. So a big thing that a lot of our migrants, particularly coming from the US, value is that you get free healthcare down here in New Zealand. So for anyone migrating as a PA, you would be granted a 5-year work visa, and I will go into that shortly. But what that means is you are actually entitled to free public funded healthcare. So some people will maintain their private insurance, which is completely up to them. But ultimately, you don't have to if you don't want to. You will be entitled to access that free public funded healthcare the minute you arrive on your work visa. We also have what we call the Accident Compensation Corporation, or ACC for short. And what that means is you're injured either at work or you're out doing you might be running or riding your bike. If you hurt yourself, ACC will actually cover a big portion of your treatment. So you'll get subsidized x-rays and physios, osteos, all of that kind of stuff. And if you have to be off work for a period of time, they will actually pay 80% of your wage until you're good to go back to work. So that's a massive bonus as well, that you are really well looked after by our healthcare system down here. The other thing that's also on a lot of people's minds, we help a lot of families migrate. So naturally they think about schooling. Just like everywhere else in the world, we have public and private schooling. The education you receive in both public and private is incredibly similar. Some people will send their children to private school, maybe because of religious reasons or because that particular school might offer particular sporting or academic opportunities for their child. But once you're in New Zealand on a work visa or you hold residency, your children who are under the age of 19 can attend primary school and secondary school for free. That's in the public system, and your child can also attend early childhood education. So everyone in New Zealand does pay for early childhood education, but that is subsidized from the time that a child is 3. So you will be entitled to all of that on your work visa as well. So your kids can arrive into New Zealand, you can enroll them into school, and they can be immersed in the New Zealand schooling. Gosh, stop, Charlotte. Stop and start again. They can be immersed in the New Zealand education system right from the time they arrive into New Zealand, which is a really positive thing for your family. If you want to send your children to private school, everyone does pay for private education. So just be mindful of that, but you will be able to send your children to a private school at the domestic student rates. You won't be paying as an international student. Now, I'll let Shelly jump in here before I jump into my blurb about visas, and I'll get her to give us a bit of a rundown on what it looks like for a PA in New Zealand at the moment if you're looking to migrate.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So my name is Shelly Collins. I'm a PA, been a PA for almost 20 years now from the US, as you can probably tell by the accent. I'm currently the president of the New Zealand Physician Associate Society and have been for about the past 3 years. I migrated to New Zealand myself almost 5 years ago, January of 2020, with my husband and our then 12-year-old daughter. and I've been practicing in the healthcare system since then in general practice. I will say that I felt like the migration process was pretty simple, honestly. There's not a ton of hoops to jump through, and it goes really smoothly. We came over on a work visa initially, and then but we very quickly got our permanent residency as well, and so now we're permanent residents, and it's been wonderful. So I will tell you, practicing as a PA in New Zealand is a little bit different for two reasons. If you're from the US, it will be different because it is public health care system. And so things work a little bit differently. One of the wonderful things about this particular system is that you don't have to do coding or billing or all of the extra stuff you have to do in the US to make the insurance companies happy, which is really nice. And you also don't worry about your patients going broke or having to go bankrupt because they can't pay their medical bills because it's free. And so they can always see their doctor. The second way it's different right now for PAs, regardless of what country you're from, is that the profession isn't currently regulated. We're working on that process, and actually, Parliament, and Cabinet will be voting on that bill in December. December 16th is the vote. So if it passes, then we will start the process of being a regulated, registered profession. And then we will have things like our own New Zealand medical license number, so we can put everything under our own names. Without that right now, you practice sort of like you had to practice when you were fresh out of school or when you were doing your rotations and you didn't have your full certification yet, which means you see patients all day long, you do your regular clinic work, but everything has to go under your supervising physician's name. So whenever I order lab work or imaging or prescriptions, anything like that, it all has to go under my supervising physician's name. So that's kind of the downside of being a PA in New Zealand right now, but it's also kind of exciting too, because you can be part of bringing a new profession to the country and introducing it to New Zealand. We've really loved it. My family and I have loved it. We have no plans to leave or go back anytime soon. We're here for the long term, and I really recommend the country in general as well. It's been so nice coming from America, um, where everything is just kind of go go go, and your work life balance is work is your number one priority, and stay late if you have to, and work on weekends if you have to. Here is very, very different. When they say New Zealand cherishes that work-life balance, they really mean it. For example, when I was interviewing with my current group, my potential supervising doctor said, "Now, which day of the week do you want off?" And I was totally confused. I didn't know. I was like, Saturday, Sunday, I guess. I don't know. And he said, "No, no, no. We don't recommend you work more than 4 days a week because you'll just get too burned out. You really need that day off to go and do what you want to and have fun." And that's kind of how everybody goes along here in New Zealand. It's really great. The work-life balance is wonderful, and it's been a great country.
Oh, that's awesome. So if Parliament do vote on the 16th of December to make PAs a
hmm
regulated profession in New Zealand,
hmm
how long do they anticipate it's going to take for you to actually become, I guess, a registered PA? Is it from there, is it going to be several months or several years before we actually see that being a registered profession down here?
So the estimate is 15 to 18 months. So
Okay.
so they're anticipating somewhere around mid 2026 they'll start actually having licenses, putting out licenses. So pretty exciting.
It's actually not as long as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say it's going to be 5 years, because one thing you've probably learned, Shelley, since you've migrated
Mm.
to New Zealand is, even though we're a big island, New Zealand does still kind of work on island time. So things can actually take a lot longer than what you're perhaps used to at home. It's often a
That's
thing I
true.
get with my clients when they're particularly applying for jobs. They'll say, "Oh, no one's got back to me," and it's like, "Well, how long has it been?" "Oh, it's only been a week." Well, that's okay. That's normal. Whereas, and that's just common in New Zealand across so many things. So 15 to 18 months doesn't actually seem that bad, particularly for the New Zealand government, really, to kind of say yes and then work through everything they need to make your registered professions. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So Anything else you'd like to share with anyone watching this today that you think's really valuable that you've learned throughout the process of migrating as a PA?
One piece of advice I would have for anyone thinking about migrating as a PA is to just make sure you are fully prepared to embrace that island life. And especially if you're coming from the States, be prepared to not be able to just get anything you want 24 hours a day. You can't order something from Amazon and get it overnight on your doorstep the next day. And you just have to let all that go and you have to embrace it and just go with kind of a simpler lifestyle, which is really, really nice.
Oh, awesome. Well, it sounds like your experience has been positive, which is what we like to
Absolutely.
hear. Perfect. So I'll just jump into what it looks like visa-wise, because obviously everyone who is listening to this today will need a visa of some description to migrate. So as a physician's assistant, most people will enter into New Zealand on what we call an accredited employer work visa. So when our borders reopened after COVID in 2022, the government combined 6 different types of work visa into one, which actually has made the whole system a lot more streamlined. So everyone coming into the country on the basis of skilled employment comes in on that accredited employer work visa. And that is based on a job offer. So the first piece of the puzzle is to get your job offer and then you can apply for your visa. I will just keep these in here. So New Zealand Shores does do all types of visas. We often get people in these webinars who perhaps have jumped in thinking, oh, I might learn something about just migrating to New Zealand in general. So if one of these visas does reflect your situation better, please do feel free to reach out to us at health@newzealandshores.com with your inquiry and we can get back to you as quickly as possible. But I will just be chatting mostly about the accredited employer work visa. So part of that accredited employer work visa does mean that your employer has to be accredited. And what that means is your employer is approved by the New Zealand government or Immigration New Zealand to actually hire migrants. So part of that process is an application to become accredited. And what they have to do is they have to show that they're financially stable and that they have adhered to immigration law and employment law in the past. So if an employer is accredited or they're willing to go through the process to become accredited, you know they're going to be a good employer. So it's ultimately a good thing. Yes, it is a bit more compliance on the employer side, but as a migrant, it is actually a really good step that the government has now enforced that since 2022. The second part of that process, once the employer has become accredited, is an employer job check. And what that means is the employer has to go out to the New Zealand market, they have to advertise the role and they have to prove that there's no New Zealanders available. Well, hey, that's actually pretty easy when in the case of PAs, because you're not a huge occupation industry down here. It's really easy for these to go through. So it is almost just a bit of a formality, but it is one that they do have to submit, and we can't skip that step, because what happens is once that job check is approved, you get given your job token, and a job token is a unique link that actually allows you to apply for your visa. So unless your employer's gone through those 2 steps of accreditation and job check, we can't actually get to that visa stage. Particularly in the health space, I've never had an employer push back and say, no, I don't want to become accredited or I don't want to do a job check. Reality is if they want you, they will go through that process. You can check already if an employer has become accredited, but to be perfectly honest, there are still a lot of people, and even there's still a lot of GP clinics who are only taking the step to become accredited when they actually decide they want to hire someone from offshore, whether it's a PA or a GP or a nurse. So don't be put off if your employer hasn't gone through that process, or your New Zealand employer hasn't gone through that process, because we can guide them through that. And that's probably about 50% of our jobs at the moment, is actually dealing with the employers, liaising with them on our clients' behalf and guiding them through these steps so that you can apply for your visa. The accredited employer work visa for any PAs will be a 5-year work visa. So that allows you to live and work in New Zealand for that 5-year period. Your visa will have 3 stipulations on it. So it will say the employer you can work for. So that employer will be the employer that's become accredited, gone through the job check process, and given you that job token. So you can't chop and change, unfortunately. It will, well, not on that particular visa initially. It will stipulate a location. So it will say that you have to work for that employer in that location, and it will say you have to work as a PA. Obviously, not too many people go and shop and change their occupations, particularly people in the healthcare space, because it takes far too long to train to do something else. But your visa will have those 3 stipulations. If you get to New Zealand and decide, actually, I don't really like my employer, or I don't like the location I'm living in, but you're still on that work visa, we can go through a process of applying for a variation of conditions that will allow you to change employers. You do still need another job offer, but it is quite straightforward and takes about 2 or 3 weeks. So it's not a massive process to go through. So in one sense, yes, your visa will say you have to work for that employer, but in another sense, it's quite easy to change if you decide it's not for you. You do have to be paid median wage and market rate. So median wage at the moment for a work visa is $29.66 per hour, but they will also assess your job offer on market rate, which means they will look at the location you're in and the industry average. So that means that if an industry average is above that median wage, you do have to be paid higher than median wage. What is kind of the average salary at the moment, Shelley, for PAs?
So depending on experience, it's anywhere between $60 to $80 an hour.
Okay, yeah. So look, you guys will be well above that median wage, but what it means is if it is $60 to $80 an hour, they can't just pay you $29.66. So immigration will check in on that as well. In some cases for partners, if your partner gets the job offer first, there are some salary exemptions based on role type, but I won't delve too deeply into that because it's not necessarily overly relevant to everyone. And on that accredited employer work visa, your family can get visas as well. So partners can get open partnership work visas, and children can get domestic student visas, which do allow them to attend school. If you've got children 19 or older, definitely reach out to us for a chat because the process for them is slightly different, because in New Zealand you attend school at the latest until 19, and then you can't attend secondary or school or high school after that. So we may have to look at options if your child's older than 19, but we can guide you through that process. When it comes to applying for residency, and I'm sure, Shelley, you know the skilled migrant category very well because this is what you would have applied under. This is our traditional pathway to residency for most of our clients. You do have to be 55 years or younger to apply. In some cases, we can apply for age waivers, but that is a case-by-case basis and it's not guaranteed to everyone. So again, if you are over that age of 55, please do reach out and we can give you a bit of guidance in that space as to what that might look like. The skilled migrant category, again, this will be slightly different from when you applied, Shelley, because they rejigged it at the end of last year. You have to be able to claim 6 points, and those 6 points will come predominantly from one of these 3 factors. So either your qualification, or your job offer, or your occupational registration. The remainder of your points will come from actually working in New Zealand for a period of time. So because most PAs hold master's degrees, your master's degree is worth 5 points. And then in order to get your last point to be eligible to apply, you then have to work in New Zealand for 12 months. If you are paid at $80 an hour, or in fact, if you're paid at higher than $62 an hour, you can actually apply maybe under the work to residence category on the basis of 2 years work experience. But again, we can have a kind of look based at your job offer, or we can then say, all right, this is going to be what the best pathway is for your family. If you've got a partner who's also skilled who may be able to apply for residency sooner, then we can look at that as well. So we will always look at what is the best option for you as a family.
And I might say, Charlotte, that about 80% of the PAs, of the 46 PAs who are working in New Zealand right now, do have their residence. They went through the skilled migrant residency and have become residents.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, most, look, probably I would say if I had to throw stats, it would probably be about 80% of our clients go through that skilled migrant process. We obviously get the odd person who doesn't intend to stay, but most people coming down to New Zealand, I think you get here and decide it's home, don't you? So you don't leave.
That's right.
So how residence visas work in New Zealand, so everyone is initially granted with a resident visa that has conditions. For anyone who has already spent a period of time working in New Zealand, the conditions attached to that will be that you have to live in New Zealand for 6 months out of each year for 2 years. So it's a presence requirement, and it's also called your travel conditions. It just means you have to live here for that period. You don't necessarily have to remain employed. You could become self-employed. You could have a total career change if you wanted to. You're free to do as you please employment-wise, but you do just have to be in New Zealand for that period of time for those 2 years. Once you get to the end of that 2-year period, you can then apply for permanent residence, and permanent residence lifts those travel conditions. So once you hold permanent residence, you're free to do as you please. You could return home for 10, 20, 30, 40 years and always have the right to return. It's always really important, I think, for children more so, who are included in family applications, because it means that they've got full flexibility to do as they please once they're adults, but they will always have the right to come back and live in New Zealand, which is awesome. Once you've held a resident visa, so that could be residence or permanent residence for a total of 5 years, you can actually then apply for citizenship. So the easiest way, so Shelly, you're probably almost eligible if you're not already.
Yeah.
The easiest way I explain it to people is you're a resident for 2 years, a permanent resident for 3, and then if you want to apply for citizenship, you can. You don't have to, it's totally up to you. Some people will choose to, some people won't. New Zealand does allow dual citizenship though, so if that is an option that you want to go through, you can. I know the US and the UK both allow dual citizenship as well, but not every country does. So if you hold multiple passports, you might just have to check in with each country to make sure that if you do take up citizenship for New Zealand, that that's not going to affect your citizenship elsewhere. So just a quick recap, I guess, on New Zealand shores, and then I'll hand back to Shelly quickly for any closing remarks. We have been around since 2009. We have done over 18,000 visa applications in that time, and 6,500 of those were actually in the last 3 years. And that's from stats we have pulled from Immigration New Zealand directly. So we have got a massive wealth of knowledge across our team. And if one advisor isn't sure on something, well, we've got another 11 that they can go and chat to. So we promise that anything about your family or your situation is not unusual. We've probably seen it all at some point. We also try to quote fairly. We understand migration is an expensive process, so we encourage people to get, quotes from several companies, but we do know that we are definitely one of the more fairer quoters in the industry. So it's worth definitely having a chat to other people, but we're really proud of the fact that we offer a really good service for a really reasonable price, because we don't think getting help with your visa process should be daylight robbery effectively. It is, we do also say you can do the process yourself, but mistakes can be costly. So if you make a mistake on a visa application, immigration will decline it. They aren't overly friendly in that place. They don't really accept, sorry, I made a mistake. So it is really worth, particularly if your situation's a little bit unique or unusual, it's definitely worth having a chat with us, and we can give you some guidance in that space. The last thing I will end on is forums, Facebook, blogs, whatever it might be, can be misleading. In New Zealand, you have to be either a licensed immigration advisor or a lawyer to provide immigration advice. So stay off Facebook for visa questions. We're in a number of the Facebook groups, and for every question I see posted about visas, most of the answers are generally incorrect. So they will lead you astray. And just make sure if you are engaging with an advisor or a lawyer that they are definitely registered in New Zealand, because you legally have to be. So just things to be aware of about the process. Anything else you'd like to add, Shelly?
I would just like to encourage any PA from the US, Canada, or the UK who's thinking they want to make a change or feeling kind of burned out with medicine in general to really think about New Zealand. I have to say that I was considering just getting out of medicine altogether before we moved, because I was so burned out with how the system worked. And it's been a game changer. I think you will never regret coming over and giving it a try. And the profession's really taking off, even though 46 sounds like not many. The profession is doubling every year. So I would encourage you to take a look at it if you're interested.
Well, there you go. I don't think I could give a better sales pitch than that about New Zealand. So thank you. All right, everyone. Well, we will leave our contact details in the blurb below the video. So if you feel like you'd like to either touch base with New Zealand Shores, or I'm sure, Shelley, are you happy for people to contact you if they've got questions?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Feel free to reach out to either one of us. We'd love to hear from you. Visa questions to me, questions about being a PA to Shelley, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.